Welcome, film fans, to the first in hopefully a indefinitely running kind of weekly series that I plan to do, where we look at, as the title suggests, it's called 21st Century Breakdown, where I kind of look at, or break down, or kind of analyse, or just essentially talk about with you guys films from the 21st century that I think are kind of hidden gems, risk being forgotten, were kind of underrated on release, or I think are being underrated now. Essentially just films that are a little bit from the beaten path, and essentially talking about why I think they're worthy of viewing and worthy of discussion. Like I said, I hope for it to be a weekly thing, and beyond that, that's the only kind of rules to this, is that the film has to be kind of just made and released in the 21st century. So we're looking at films essentially made in the last, 22, 23 years now going on. So, yeah, the first one I've chosen, I mean, I kind of didn't want to think too hard about the first film that I wanted to choose. And as it kind of happens, this kind of happened by circumstance. This first selection for this series, which was the 2013 film Enough Said. Kind of a maybe somewhat unusual, interesting choice it might prove to be as the series continues. But I first watched this earlier on this week, and I actually happened to watch it. So it's a kind of, how you would broadly describe it, as a kind of do I say romantic? Romantic comedy comes with, like all genre labels, so many loaded expectations. So you say rom-com to someone, particularly kind of like a typical male, right? They're going to, turn straight off and just like, nah, I'm not interested. But I think the best rom-coms actually are the ones that don't evoke those instant stereotypical feelings of what we think rom-coms to be necessarily. But for all intents and purposes, I would probably describe this as a romantic comedy, in the sense that it's meant to be both about romance and funny, right? So, but I watched this for the first time earlier on this week, and it stars Julie Louis-Dreyfus and James Gandolfini, the late James Gandolfini, as essentially two divorcees, two separate divorcees that meet each other at this party. And they meet each other, actually, the first time they interact, they meet each other and kind of comment on how they find nobody at the party attractive. So it gets onto a great start there, right? That's the kind of joke. And they don't instantaneously warm to each other, but you can kind of tell that there's something there to begin with. And they go on a date, and as it turns out, they actually get on really well. They're quite compatible. They have quite somewhat similar interests, but they're also very different. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, Eva, is a kind of a certified massage therapist, and she has a client who's also this female divorcee who complains about her ex-husband an awful lot, and as it turns out, which this is the kind of major bumping point of the film, where I think either people will go, no, I'm not into this film, or do you know what, I can overlook this. It turns out, of course, that the client that she has, her ex-husband, is Albert, played by James Gandolfini, who she's now dating. So she's in this weird position where she actually, via this client who's complaining about Albert all the time, about all his kind of foibles and flaws, and what always used to annoy her, and the fact that he's useless in bed, he was useless. He just always did the wrong things, the wrong gestures, and all the little annoyances that he used to do, especially with like the guacamole, is a thing that's made up in this film, where he kind of separates the onions from the guacamole, because he doesn't like the onions, but he likes guacamole. She's put in this position where she's able to know about his flaws before it's too late for her to find out about the flaws going on into the relationship. So that's the kind of plot of the film. And they both have, like I say, some similarities. So both Eva and Albert both have daughters that are same ages, that are going away to college. And so they're both leaving the nest, as it were, and they both share those kind of same anxieties of their only child leaving the nest, and they're both divorcees of a similar age. And they both kind of have like this lack of confidence in themselves, the fact that they're both middle-aged in their 40s. So, you know, it's a film that's, you know, it's not made for your kind of stereotypical audience, your young kind of teenage audience that a lot of films would be made for these days. So that's an interesting point about the film. But I think what actually struck me most, just from a kind of real subjective point of view, is that I happened to watch this on the day that would have been James Gandolfini's 62nd birthday. He passed away in 2013, the year that this film was released. In fact, this is the penultimate film that James Gandolfini ever starred in. He did one more film in 2013, which was The Fall, that he shot, which is a kind of thriller starring Tom Hardy, a crime film. And yeah, this was the penultimate film he starred in. He passed away that year whilst on holiday in Rome of June that year. And I kind of want to make that the focus of this discussion, really, is that because I still remember it had a huge impact on me when James Gandolfini passed, and I can tell it did because I remember where I was when I heard about it. I was actually in London at the time, and I was with a friend who was kind of doing an induction at a university down there. I can't remember what the university was, but he was doing an induction at a university down there, and we were in this pub. We were in the back of this London pub. We just ordered a pint. Go to the back, and I'm with him and his parents sat at this table, and Sky News is on in the background, and of course you can't hear what's being said because the volume's turned down. The vibe of the pub that's what you can hear, the sounds, of course. And I just remember looking at the screen, and it had this kind of, I don't know if it was breaking news then, or if it was just, it had this kind of report on James Gandolfini has died suddenly. I think he was 52 at the time. So yeah, it would have been his 62nd birthday just gone, this week just gone. And he died suddenly of a heart attack in Rome. And at that time, I was working my way through The Sopranos, which of course is the series that is the role that James Gandolfini is most remembered for, is the New Jersey mobster Tony Soprano. And I was almost done watching that series. I was probably just starting series 6, I believe, at the time, and I was absolutely, because I was loving the series, and I was devastated. It was very, very shocking. So it's obviously because I can remember exactly where I was, like I've just explained, and and it's taken me 10 years, because this obviously was made in 2013. 10 years to catch up with this film. And I think it was released posthumously because in the beginning of the end credits, it's actually dedicated to him. It says for Jim. So, and so several things struck me about this in relation to kind of James Gandolfini here, which is one of those things being that I fear, like, obviously the role, like I say, he's most remembered for is The Sopranos. And I always feel like, for as great as he was in that role, and James Gandolfini is kind of great in everything that he's in, he never had the kind of, that success never really translated into the medium of film. He was never really in a great role in a great film. And he was kind of typecast a lot of the time as a kind of scumbag character, or a kind of mobster, or a criminal, or, if you look at his roles in, say, True Romance, for example, or She's So Lovely, which is another film I actually recently watched, which is a kind of forgotten film of the 90s now. It's a very weird film, though. It's very unusual. I shouldn't say weird, but it's just very, very unusual film. And films of that nature, right? 8mm, he plays a kind of scumbag in that as well. Of course, The Sopranos, he's a mobster, and even films after, like Killing Them Softly and The Drop, these are a lot of crime films. He branched out a little bit. He kind of had a comedic role in The Loop, for example, and he's in Zero Dark 30. But again, in minor roles though, and his success never really translated into kind of great roles. He was always in those kind of, a lot of films that again are off the beaten track. Like a lot of the Sopranos cast, actually, they're in these kind of like little gems of films that are sprinkled here and there. They're seldom in these big films that you kind of instantaneously know and remember. And I feel like with this film, he finally had a substantial lead role that actually showed more of what he was capable of in terms of his range. because I think the appeal of someone like Gandolfini is he's a very interesting actor and person, I think, as a result of his his depiction of masculinity, which is that he's not afraid to make himself vulnerable. Because in this film, just like in The Sopranos, his weight's commented on. Now in The Sopranos, he deliberately, as you've watched the series throughout, he gets bigger and bigger, right? And it's kind of meant to resemble his greed in a kind of way. So his size is kind of meant to be symbolic of Tony Soprano's kind of, like I say, his growing greed and monstrousness, as it were. Whereas, so the role requires that of him. Whereas here, he's just his kind of, it feels like his natural self. And that's a big positive of this film, I think, is it's a very naturalistic film. The performances they're all great in this, and Toni Collette's in this film as well, for example. And Catherine Keener, she's the kind of the ex that always complains about Albert, Gandolfini's character. And I just think that in this, a lot's made of Albert's weight, how he's meant to be always going on these kind of fad diets, never sticks to it. And again, he's kind of not the most confident person because of his weight. And Eva says, that he's not the typical male she would be attracted to because he's, quite, podgy, or even the word obese is mentioned, And I think it takes an actor of great kind of, I don't want to say, well, yeah, like awareness and bravery and conviction to kind of say, this is who I am, and I don't mind my own natural weight being, critiqued and put on display and kind of used as a point in the film. And as a result, like I say, Gandolfini in the film comes across both very naturalistic, but also showing a great vulnerability that's there that I don't think a lot of actors or stars in particular go for, And so he just comes across like, and this is the true strength of the film, that the film is at its best when characters are just, particularly the two leads, are just sat talking. They're having these naturalistic conversations and they just feel like real people. And it's very hard to make a film that gets that right, because of course it's constructed for us, for the audience. So to make a script feel so alive and naturalistic in that way is actually a very difficult thing to do. So the director, Nicole Holofcener, does a really good job there. There is a plot contrivance with the whole, of course, her massage client has to be the one that's the ex of of Albert, who she's always complaining about. But if you can overlook that, because it's a kind of necessary plot contrivance, and I think you can overlook it due to the rest of the naturalism that the film gives you, I think that the film is ultimately pretty, it's very rewarding, in the sense that it's a kind of breezy film it's kind of a light, breezy film that just washes over you in a way, in a really nice way. I think you feel good after watching this film. It's only like 89 minutes long, so it's a kind of slender watch. It's not a particularly long film, but it's nice to see a film that, because so many of us these days complain that, and I'm guilty of this, like really guilty of this, that not enough films, or we even say sometimes we go to the extreme and say no films these days are made for adults. But this is a kind of exhibit A to disproving that a little bit, because I think Enough Said is a film which is, it's made by adults and it's for adults. It's really is concerned with the kind of the worries, the anxieties, the plights of middle-aged divorcees in their 40s who kind of think, well, their prime's over, their physical prime's over, and the awkwardness that comes with that of trying to meet someone new, and even the way that they meet doesn't feel contrived. That also feels naturalistic. That a lot of people do just meet in this pretty unspectacular way, and I just like, and I like the whole aspect of the film that is, the kind of theme of the film is, would you get into a relationship with someone if you knew their flaws first? Because Eva's questioning her commitment to Albert the more and more she hears about the flaws, but they're the flaws that someone's subjective experience and opinion of someone else, it's what they find to be flaws. It isn't necessarily what she finds to be flaws, but it's just the fact that they're complaining negatively about someone else, that influences her opinion. And what I find interesting about that for younger audiences like myself, where we kind of date in the internet age, is that's precisely what we deal with on a basis. If you've ever tried internet dating, it's that precise thing of you're looking for all the red flags to begin with in a completely unnatural setting, because internet dating is all about kind of the commodification of love, right? All these apps and sites actually just really exist to make money off and exploit people who are single. Essentially, technically speaking, that's what they exist for. That's the service they provide. You could say they have a vested interest in you staying single. Otherwise, they would cease to exist, right? But the way love is commodified, where you have to sell yourself to someone from the get-go, is a completely unnatural and artificial way of what love should or is supposed to be. And this is a kind of reaffirmation of the kind of natural experience of finding love or finding someone you're attracted to. And yet with internet dating, we have the exact scenario that this film kind of conjures up, where there's an outside influence or something there that goes, well, these are all the negatives, or you want to know all the red flags first. But actually, if you just met that person, say that stranger online, in a completely naturalistic setting, who knows, you might actually really get on with them. So I just find it's interesting that it's a film made in this kind of modern day age where so many of us meet people online, that where in the context of it being a naturalistic film, how it actually uses that as a plot point within that setting is really, really interesting, I think. But like I say, it's a light, breezy film that just I think it's a nice kind of end note, and obviously has that tragic, kind of quietly tragic dimension, given that it's kind of Gandolfini's penultimate role. And yeah, I just think I just thought it was a film that was kind of on my mind, I suppose, this week. So I just thought this would be a good way to kick off, because I don't think enough said really is like I say, it's a film that really probably not too many people have seen or even heard about. And I think that anything with James Gandolfini is worth seeing. But like I say, all the cast is great in this. I think it's well directed, and if you can overlook the central plot contrivance that kind of occurs in the middle, I think you have a great time with it. So yeah, that's my recommendation and my thoughts this week on the film Enough Said. And like I say, I'll be doing one of these each week, so stay tuned to see what my next film from the 21st century will be. I haven't decided myself yet. I'll probably just pick as and when during each week. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the film if you've seen it, or your thoughts on, of course, James Gandolfini, great actor that he was. And stay tuned for next week's one, and also stay tuned for my next video, which will be on, most likely, it'll be continuing the Friedkin mini season that I'm doing. So yeah, as always, take care, and I'll see you on the next one.